working class.
Your new book is called Right-Wing Collectivism, The Other Threat to Liberty. I believe you touched on this in your previous answer. What is right-wing collectivism? Why is it dangerous? And how does it differ from left-wing collectivism?
In 1820, there was born a huge revolt against liberalism. By liberalism, I mean the view that society should just be left alone to develop on its own, and that the state, insofar as it exists, should be walled off from sectors of society vis-a-vis religion, speech, human rights, all these things. Okay, so that's liberalism, and it gave birth to a wide prosperity all over Europe and all over the world, really. In 1820, we saw a revolt developing in the world's most academically advanced country, namely Germany, with the works of Friedrich Hegel, who said, look, you think you see liberty, you think you see rising prosperity. Actually, what's happening is just, we don't actually have any control over the waves of history. There are certain forces of history that exist outside human choice, and we are just inexorably blown along with them. So he began to kind of discern what these movements of history are, and believe that all of history would culminate in some point that would involve a kind of a unity of the population, or a collectivism under the control of a central power. And the Hegelians broke into two factions. One, left-wing, that believed that the collectivism would be global and abolish private property, abolish religion, abolish marriage, all this kind of thing. Those people became the Marxists. But the right-wing Hegelians, which were actually truer to the original vision of Friedrich Hegel, said no, the end point of history will culminate in the Prussian state and the Prussian church and the absolute rule by the ruling class. There will be a preservation of property and family and religion, but all these institutions will serve the great unity of the state under a single great man. So that was the rightist version of collectivism that was born in revolt against laissez-faire in 1820. And so what my book does is it traces that idea throughout the 19th century and sees its development in the United States, in Germany, again, with German immigration here, and the immigration of those ideas all over England in the works of Thomas Carlyle, and the hold on one second, and the rise of the great man theory of history, and then it got a huge boost with scientific racism, ironically born out of one of the lesser known works of Charles Darwin called The Descent of Man, in which he raised an alarm bell about the demographics of society, that humankind is going to diminish in quality if we keep improving life, getting rid of disease, perpetuating high rates of birth and immigration, these kinds of things. It was just a passing comment, but that set off a movement of white supremacy, racialist ideology all over the West, which kept getting worse. And it wasn't just resulting in eugenics. It's what gave birth to immigration restrictions, marriage licenses, labor laws, minimum wages. Essentially, the 20th century total state was born out of a rightist collectivist movement, working, I must say, in tangent with a leftist collectivist movement. I mean, that's what's interesting about this, is that in practice, there's not a whole, there's certain cultural differences and certain tone differences between right and left-wing collectivism, but the agenda always is unified on one thing: the state should be in charge. I mean, that's the version. The right-wing version just, it differs, like I say, in cultural priorities and things like that. Left-wing collectivism tends to be more globalist. Right-wing collectivism is always and everywhere very nationalist and protectionist and nativist. But I think it's important for us to remember that these are just kind of different colorations of the same anti-liberal party. Now, the reason I wrote my book was to, and in many ways it's written not just for the alt-right, but also for libertarians and liberals, to become more aware of the existence of this movement as a threat to liberty. It's like, I think we know a lot about socialism. We've been schooled in it. All the professors at college were socialists. I mean, we've been annoyed by socialists all the time. The right-wing collectivists have never had the kind of cultural prominence that the left has had. So as a result, they had to kind of grow. They had to become an underground movement. And so people have not been entirely aware of them. Essentially, Charlottesville was the great coming out, you know, and people were shocked by that. Well, I wasn't shocked by it. That happened a month before my book appeared. I've been studying these issues for 2 years prior. And my point isn't to say, okay, the biggest threat we face is on the right. That's not my point. I mean, I don't know what the biggest threat we face is. It changes every day. Sometimes it's the left, sometimes the right. But the biggest threat we face is that both of these groups are responding to each other. So the left gets power and the right adopts its strategies and tactics and ambitions and comes after it. And then that creates another blowback, and these blowbacks just keep going on in circles. And I think it's important for anybody who believes in sort of basic Western morality and the basic postulate of human rights and human dignity to be intellectually aware of this tennis match that's going on between these two, and then just decline to participate and build out a liberal movement that's separate from both left and right. That's my argument.